2 weeks ago, war broke out in Israel. When that happened, I asked myself, is this something that is significant? What does the Bible say about Israel and war and the end times? You go back 2,000 years ago. Jesus predicted in 30 AD that the temple would be destroyed. It had been also predicted in the Old Testament. Well, 40 years later, 70 AD, the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, and by 135 AD, they had renamed the nation of Israel to Palestine and scattered 600,000 Jewish people all over the world. Israel was no longer. Yet God had promised throughout the Old Testament that that would not be the case. He had promised to protect those that had been scattered. He had promised to gather the scattered together again. He had promised to return them to their promised homeland. Beyond that, He promised to bless them there. Interesting. Israel is now one of the most fruitful nations in the world, especially for its size. He promised to never abandon them again. And He promised to unite Israel and Judah together as one nation. And He promised to do that all, bring it together and all come together, and Israel would become a nation again in one day. That's unbelievable. But what is even more unbelievable is it happened. May 14th, 1948, Israel was reborn. Yay, God. Never in history has a scattered, decimated nation come back together and been reborn, but Israel has been. In several places in the Old Testament, we're told that this is an indication of the last days. This will happen in the latter days, the last days. Jesus linked this event as a sign of His second coming. And you think, well, what's going to happen with this war right now in Israel? I'll tell you, Israel's going to be fine. God will protect Israel. There have been half a dozen wars since 1948, and every one God has fought with Israel, and they have won. And they will keep winning right up until the great war, the War of Armageddon. God will protect His people. What does all this say to us today? It says Israel's going to be okay in this war, but more importantly, it says we are in the last days. Jesus is coming soon, and we need to be ready.